In my previous video, I examined the LDS Church's claims concerning Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. In this video, I am going to examine the Church's claims regarding Noah and the flood. The Church teaches that the flood in the time of Noah was a worldwide event. It killed every living thing except for the people and animals which were saved on Noah's ark. The flood covered the earth's surface and served as its baptism. The Church teaches that this flood took place about 4,400 years ago, and that Noah built the ark in North America, and then landed in the Old World after the waters receded. In the college-level institute classes, it is taught it should be remembered that the Garden of Eden was North America. Although it is not known how far men had moved from that general location in the 1,600 years between the fall of Adam and the flood, it is likely that Noah and his family lived somewhere in the general area. The Mormon scriptures, the Book of Mormon, the Book of Moses, and the Doctrine and Covenants, all refer to Noah's Ark as being a literal story. Elder Bruce R. McConkie at the Quorum of the 12 Apostles taught that the Garden of Eden was in Missouri. Noah was taken to the Old World by the flood. This teaching was given by Joseph Smith and is still accepted as true doctrine. Given this teaching, Mormons have to accept the flood as a global phenomenon. Joseph claimed to know a lot about Noah that was revealed to him by God, including that Noah was born to save the seed of everything when the earth was washed in its wickedness by the flood. This teaching has been confirmed in modern times by Mark E. Peterson, who taught that some doubt that there was a flood, but by modern revelation we know that it did take place. By modern revelation we know that for more than a century Noah pleaded with the people to repent, but in their willful stubbornness they would not listen. The church leadership continues to teach that the flood was a worldwide event. Elder Joseph Ciatti taught the following in the October 2009 General Conference.
As Adam's children multiplied, two groups emerged. One group, led by Enoch, kept the covenant so well that they could no longer be retained on the earth, so the Lord gathered them unto himself. The second group was overcome in wickedness so great that they suffered the judgments of God. The flood swallowed them up, leaving only the family of Noah, a righteous descendant of Enoch.
The church also teaches that the flood covered the entire earth at once, and that this literally served as the baptism of the earth. Elder Joseph Fielding Smith taught that the first ordinance instituted for the cleansing of the earth was that of the immersion in water. It was buried in the liquid element, and all things sinful upon the face of the earth were washed away. As it came forth from the ocean floor like a newborn child, it was innocent. It rose to a newness of life. It was its second birth from the womb of the mighty waters, a new world issuing from the ruins of the old, clothed with all the innocence of this first creation. He further taught that the flood was the baptism of the earth, and that had to be by immersion. If the water did not cover the entire earth, then it was not baptized, for the baptism of the Lord is not pouring or sprinkling. So how could we go about testing this claim? Well, if there really was a global flood that covered the entire surface of the earth for almost a year, there should be plenty of physical evidence for it, both in the geological record and in the distribution of the plants and animals upon the face of the earth. Since the flood killed all of the flesh upon the face of the earth, then all living people, animals, and plants should be able to trace their ancestors back to the area around Mount Ararat, which is supposedly where the ark came to a rest after the floodwaters receded, got out of the ark, and went on their merry reproductive way. In addition, let's also look at ice caps. If there really was a worldwide flood that lasted most of a year, it would have destroyed any ice flows upon the surface of the earth at that time. So one way we can test the veracity of the worldwide flood is to see how old are the ice caps. According to the Apica Project in Antarctica, the deepest ice cores they have extracted in Antarctica date back about 80,000 years. Some ice cores from Vostok, Greenland, while deeper, about 3,000 meters, date back only about 40,000 years. Now, you could ask, how do we know this? How do we know that the ice cores are that old? Ice cores have layers, which can be used to determine their age. This picture shows a section of TSP2 ice core from 1,837 to 1,838 meters. And as you can see, the annual layers are clearly visible. The layers result from a difference in the size of the snow crystals deposited in the summer and deposited in the winter, and differences in the size and the abundance of air bubbles that are trapped in the ice. Counting these layers has been used in conjunction with some other techniques to reliably determine the age of the ice. This ice was formed about 16,250 years ago during the last ice age. Known events are also recorded in the ice caps, such as ash layers from volcanic eruptions such as Krakatoa and Mount St. Helens. We know when those eruptions occurred, and we know where they should be in the ice core layers, and we see them there. This helps us calibrate the dating of the ice cores and helps confirm the accuracy of the method. There's not enough time since when the flood should have happened, 4,400 years ago, for the ice caps to have formed all those layers in depth that we have. Another thing to look at and consider is freshwater fish. A worldwide flood lasting a year would have resulted in all of the water on Earth to have the same salinity, or roughly the same salinity. Regardless, it would have all been salt water. There's lots of aquatic life that cannot live in salt water. This would have killed all the freshwater fish. Now let's look at the logistics of the ark. The obvious question is, how can all of the animals migrate from all over the world, crossing oceans and deserts and mountain ranges, to get to North America, where Noah was building his ark? How did the penguins get there? How did the koalas, platypuses, and kangaroos get there? How could 8 people care for the tens of millions of species of animals, all on this small boat, for over a year? Imagine the largest zoo in the world, and that there's only a crew of 8, and you're one of the 8, and you have to take care of all of these animals. It's up to you to provide them with food, water, keep their areas clean, handle their waste, and keep them healthy. Now imagine that there's still only 8 of you, but you have to manage a zoo 100 times that size, all condensed into a small little boat in the middle of a turbulent ocean. How are you going to provide all of the highly specialized diets, environments, and living conditions for every species of animal? For instance, koalas only eat eucalyptus leaves, and silkworms only eat mulberry plants. What about strict carnivores, many of which will only eat highly specialized types of foods like mammals or insects or fish or shellfish? Many animals will only eat live or freshly dead animals. So how did Noah and his family provide this variety of food and keep all of these food supplies fresh for a full year? Another thing to consider is, how did tens of millions of species fit inside the ark? According to the church's Old Testament student manual, the ark was only supposed to be a little over 400 feet long. If we assume there's 5 layers for animals and people to be able to stand upright, we're looking at a square footage of only a little over 171,000 square feet. If we were to say that the average animal needed 10 square feet for itself and its year-long supply of food, that leaves room for a little over 17,000 animals, or only a little over 8,500 species since we're dealing with pairs. That doesn't take into account the areas necessary for walkways, freshwater storage, a waste removal system, and the room required for every species of plant alive today. After the flood was over and the ark was empty, how did Noah get all of the marsupials back to Australia? How did he get the penguins to the South Pole and the polar bears to the north? The giant sloths back to South America? The flood would have destroyed all the plant life. This means that Noah would have had to have every species of plant that's alive today on the ark with him. Every fruit tree, shade tree, vegetable, cactus, pine tree, grass, wheat, barley, flowers, bushes, vines, whatever, had to be on the ark in order to survive the flood. This also would have required the right types of soils and the right amount of fresh water for those plants to have survived a year on the ark. And then they would have to be planted in the right geological locations after the flood was over. That brings up another problem. After almost a year under the ocean, the entire surface of the earth would have been a wasteland with all of the plant life destroyed, and the soil would have been contaminated with salt. Those plants would not have been able to grow in that soil. As Michael Schumer explained,
there's no possible way that Noah could have retained all 10 billion species on a single boat and then distributed them appropriately, where the marsupials are all in Australia and so forth. This is just ridiculous. It is so ridiculous, I find it embarrassing for people who attempt to prove that it's true.
When we look at it, we see that there is no scientific evidence that supports a worldwide flood, and a great deal, such as the existence of the polar ice caps and freshwater fish, and forests, that refute it. It is quite apparent that the story of Noah and the flood is not a literal story.
This is not a literal story. This is a story about destruction, redemption, starting over, beginning anew, forgiveness, redemption, and so on. To try to read it literally is to miss the point of the story.
In my next video, I will take a look at the Tower of Babel story and of the Jaredites.